Hey, how's it going, everybody? Real quick, please remember to like and subscribe so I can keep the videos coming. Alright, so today we have a lot to cover. We finally know the prices for all four next-gen consoles. We also have new news on Cyberpunk 2077 and some new game announcements since the last time I posted a video. Starting off with a summary of today's Night City Wire. It opened up with a montage that kind of really captured the culture and the political climate of Night City at the time. And it's very reminiscent of 2020 America right now. It goes into a lot of issues like homelessness and stuff. And it really gave more of a feel for what the world is going to be like. And it's not all bleak, though. It tries to keep an entertaining, upbeat energy in the montage, which is pretty common in video games for it to have this duality of a fun, upbeat gameplay experience at the forefront while having it deal with darker, more deep undertones in the background of the game and the lore and the actual story and world building. Speaking of world building, the next part was an interview with one of the devs where he talked about how they were designing every intricate detail of the city and making it a deep, flushed out world. Talking about even placing every piece of trash by hand instead of just painting it on like you can do with some editors. And how they really thought about the real world location of the California coast and how that would factor in for the districts and how they would work, like a port, how the port would function, industrial zones, residential areas, the downtown part of the city. It seems like they got a lot of variety to the city of Cyberpunk 2077, and it sounds like they put a lot of work into it. It's going to feel like truly a living, breathing world. And then after that, they gave us an overview of the gangs, and I lost count just watching the video. There were so many gangs, and each one of them had their own unique culture and kind of personality to each gang. Each gang had a sort of different philosophy, a different mindset of why they were created and what their goals are. And they're all competing for control of their portion of Night City. And it's kind of overwhelming a little bit because I don't think I've ever seen a game to date have this many factions. Just in the gangs alone, there's so many factions of gangs, and each one of them feels unique, and it looks like some of them are going to be tied into the main story of the game, and some of them may even be tied to our life paths, depending on which ones you choose. It's really shaping up, and I can't wait to play it. Alright, next up is new game announcements. All the way back to the Xbox event that I don't think I've made a video over that yet. But the three games that I really enjoyed was State of Decay 3, Fable, and Vald. The Fable games, they're kind of an older IP. I grew up playing them, and they were always a lot of fun, but they always kind of felt short of everyone's expectations. Everybody always hoped the game would be better than it always wound up being. So hopefully now that Playground Games has control, maybe they can help the IP soar to new heights in a way that Lionhead couldn't. For more of my opinions on the Fable game and the franchise as a whole, I did a video, kind of like a wish list for what I want Playground games to focus on, and I'll try to link that in the description. Next up is a Vald. We didn't really get much on a Vald. It's just a simple teaser, but it looks very much like a Elder Scrolls game, similar in the style of Skyrim. It definitely looks first person. I don't know if we'll be able to toggle third person or not. Considering what we've seen with Outer Worlds, I'd imagine it'd be similar to that. Just locked in first person. I believe that what we know about it so far is it's set in the same universe as their Pillars of Eternity, I think. I'm not completely familiar with Obsidian's IP. I just recently started playing some Wasteland 3 on Twitch, and it's a lot of fun. I'm not big on isometric style gameplay, but I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. And, Obsidian's kind of always lived in Bethesda's shadow, especially since they made Fallout New Vegas for them. And maybe this is kind of Obsidian pushing back on Bethesda a little bit. Bethesda's reputation has kind of taken a nosedive in recent years because of stuff like Fallout 76 and just general anti-consumer practices. And people are kind of getting fed up waiting around for Bethesda to make an actual good game again. And maybe this is Obsidian's chance to show that they can make the game that people want before Bethesda has a chance. Next up would be State of Decay 3. If you're not familiar with the State of Decay franchise, it's criminally underrated. They're a lot of fun. Played the first one and the second one, and I really like the second game. I've played through it several times. I've played through some of the DLC. I put a lot of time into it, and it's a zombie survival game, but unlike something like DayZ or something where you're kind of on your own and you're trying to survive on your own kind of thing, it's a lot more focused on like building up a community, and instead of you being one specific character, you control the community, so you can switch between different characters, recruit people from the world, help other groups out. You can either it's very RPG like, you build up your base, you can focus on helping people or sometimes oppressing people, whatever you think is best to help your group survive. And they really flush that out a lot more with State of Decay 2. And the developers have been given constant updates. So the way they've been really treating State of Decay 2 with real respect and care, I'm really looking forward to what they do with State of Decay 3. But from what we got of the little teaser there, it seems like maybe the zombie virus in it has spread to animals, and that opens up the opportunity to create a lot of new enemies that might be horrifying to play against, and really open up the enemy variety. And then we would also, it also kind of made it feel like it might transition a little bit away from the community based. It felt very much like that single player, play as one character surviving out in the wilderness, like a Lone Dark style game. From what I saw, I'm kind of hoping it doesn't take that direction, but as of right now, that's just what we saw from the teaser. That could be misleading. So I'll post updates if we find out anything more about that. But those were the games that really caught my eye from the Xbox event. And now for the PlayStation event. We got a bunch of new game announcements. Final Fantasy 16, Hogwarts Legacy, Spider-Man Miles Morales, which we already knew about that one. God of War Ragnarok, that was kind of a surprise to a lot of people. There's a Demon Souls remaster. They really announced a lot of games that a lot of people are into. probably the biggest one that I would be excited for is Hogwarts Legacy. Always been a pretty big Harry Potter fan, and there's been rumors going around about this game for years now, and it's nice to see that it wasn't just a dead project. We see that a lot in the games industry. They'll have a project that they are working on for sometimes years, and it never goes anywhere, and it just stays a rumor. And then you'll hear a dev come out like 5 years later and be like, "Oh yeah, we were actually working on that, but the publisher didn't like it, so they shut it down and reused the assets." That happens sometimes. So it's nice to see the game's actually coming out. It looks pretty good. We didn't really see a lot in terms of RPG. They really tried to focus more on the world, from what I can tell, and like the adventure aspect of the game. I'd like to see more with the character creation, and I don't really consider anything an RPG unless it gives you choices and meaningful choices that affects the game. So what their definition of RPG might differ from mine. But they are marketing it as an RPG, so hopefully that's good. There's a lot of controversy about the game. A lot of people think the game looks good and wants to support the developers and everything, but they're concerned about the money going to J.K. Rowling because of kind of a lot of people don't like her political opinions that she's been sharing on Twitter, and maybe a lot more people should keep their political opinions to themselves instead of sharing them all on Twitter. The world might be a much happier place. But then there's the Miles Morales game. A lot of people are really excited about how much more representation this game gives a lot of people, which is always a good thing. And it looks like it continues to expand on the gameplay mechanics that the developer established in Spider-Man, and maybe builds on top of that and tells us a new story from Miles' perspective. It looks like it's probably a sequel because we got a little bit of training towards the end of Spider-Man with Miles. So it definitely seems like it has to be a sequel. They've talked like it's going to be a little shorter than Spider-Man. Hopefully not a whole lot shorter. I know there was confusion at the announcement that it might be like a DLC add-on to Spider-Man, but that it is very clearly its own game. But there also talk about there being an Ultimate Edition where it comes with a remaster of Spider-Man PS4. So there's that. Also, with a lot of these games that were announced for the PlayStation event, including God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West, a lot of the PlayStation games have announced that they are going to be on PlayStation 4 as well. So there's no real need to upgrade anytime soon if that's a big deal for you. So, the biggest hit a Sony fan has on Xbox right now is Xbox doesn't have enough games, doesn't have enough exclusives. Well, the PlayStation 5 doesn't have any exclusives right now. Pretty much every title that's coming to the PlayStation 5. If you have a PS4, you'll be able to play it. Yeah, it might not look as great, but it might play a little worse. You're not going to get to take advantage of that souped up proprietary SSD. But there's just no convincing reason to buy a PlayStation 5 right now, in my opinion. I got a PS4 Pro, and that'll probably tie me over for PlayStation stuff for a good while until they start making its actual exclusives. I look for Sony to probably backpedal on that once they start seeing it hit their bottom line. So, speaking of all that, now that we got all the game announcements out of the way, let's talk about the new consoles and do a breakdown on what they're going to be. So the new consoles are going to be you might want to pay attention on this because it does get a little complicated. So starting off with Xbox, you have the Xbox Series S, which has no disk drive and no 4K support. However, the CPU on every console of this generation is virtually identical. Both versions of the PlayStation, both versions of the Xbox, CPUs are almost completely identical. So you got good processing power. The greatest weakness of the Series S probably lies in its 500 gigabyte SSD, which, considering the whole point of the console is it's accessible only, this is pretty low for storing actual downloads of games, making it pretty clear that this is like their experimental console for the xCloud that they've recently bundled into Game Pass. If you got Game Pass and you want to play Game Pass games pretty much exclusively, this is the best way to take advantage of xCloud. It's a pretty powerful machine, even if it's not 4K, and you don't have to worry about the small SSD because you're going to be streaming all your games. So that's clearly what they're doing with the Series S. Now for its big brother, the Xbox Series X, it is by far the front runner for this generation. Its GPU is capable of 12 teraflops compared to the PlayStation 5's 10. And it has a custom SSD with 1 terabyte of storage, which is also the largest storage built in for this generation. It comes at a pretty reasonable $499, which is about the same as what the Xbox One X launched at. So that seems to be kind of a baseline for what Microsoft considers a brand new console worth. Now on the PlayStation side, like I mentioned before, everything has virtually identical CPUs, and Sony decided finally that this time they're going to have a 4K Blu-ray drive. For those of you not aware, on the PlayStation Pro, it had 4K support for gaming, but it did not have a 4K Blu-ray drive. So if you have been stockpiling 4K Blu-rays, now's your time to shine. Every version has 4K Blu-ray now, as long as you want to actually get a disc drive. So the prices for the disc drive version of the PlayStation 5 is $499, which is on par with the Xbox Series X. And the discless will be $399, so only $100 cheaper. However, unlike the Series S, the discless or all digital edition of the PlayStation 5 will have the same specs. It will be virtually identical. The system, from what I can tell, will look the exact same as the one with the disc drive. So, on some of the downside, the PlayStation, the SSDs, I've heard rumors from like GameStop employees and stuff saying that PlayStation 5 will have a 1 terabyte SSD, but in the actual information that I've been able to find, the SSD will only be 825 gigabytes on both consoles. Now this is far better than the 500 gigabyte on the Series S, but it's still pretty low, and it's lower than the PlayStation 4 Pro, the PlayStation, the Xbox One. All of them had 1 terabyte hard drives, and the SSDs do store information differently than an HDD, but that actually makes it worse, because how an SSD works is once it gets close to being filled up, it kind of slows everything down because it it tries to load everything at once, which is why it's so much faster than an HDD. So the second that your PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X or S, as soon as you start filling that up and you're at that like 90% hard drive space, your SSD is going to slow down a lot on you. You're going to see that no loading times disappear on you. So that's something you need to watch out for. especially if you're not familiar with SSDs, and you go to get a new PlayStation or the Xbox Series S. Definitely on storage space, the Series X is the best, but I think both Microsoft and Sony dropped the ball on this one. I think with this generation, people would have gladly paid a little bit more if they had put in the effort to make the higher tier versions have 2 terabytes, or the diskless versions have 2 terabytes, and then like have the lower end versions have 1 terabyte, or at least give players an option for like maybe a 500 gigabyte option, a 1 terabyte option, 2 terabyte option, something like that. Because I guarantee a lot of people are gonna want to pay more to have more internal storage space and not have to deal with the external expansion. Now, so that's how it breaks down. Your budget option is the Series S. Does not support 4K gaming. If you are okay without having a disk drive and you want something a little cheaper, you have the PlayStation All Digital Edition. And then you have the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 neck and neck. But if I had to pick one, I would say in terms of raw power, you're looking at the Xbox Series X with the win. And based on just the games I personally like and how this generation looks and how the power is going, I would say that Xbox has a slight edge. But Microsoft's big problem for a long time has been getting out solid AAA exclusives. They have their Halo and their Gears and stuff, but if you don't like first-person shooters, if you don't like shooters, Xbox doesn't really have much for you. So, the PlayStation exclusives definitely appeal a lot more to a lot of people. So if Microsoft can't come out with something like that, hopefully we'll get something like that with Fable and a Vald. But that remains to be seen. Hopefully they can pull it together, and this might be the closest console generation we've seen in a while. And that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more videos.